Please welcome to the stage Ross Bjork, Senior Vice President and Wolf Foundation Eugene Smith Endowed Athletics Director at The Ohio State University. Martin Jarmond, the Alice and Nahum Lehner Family Director of Athletics at UCLA. And Nina King, Vice President, King Compton Family's Director of Athletics and Adjunct Professor of Business Administration at Duke University, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Janet Lorin.
Water.
Welcome to a new era in college sports with even bigger changes this year. Let's see how it's going so far. So Ross, your team is the defending national champions. You beat Texas and Arch Manning this weekend. The Ohio State-Texas game was the most watched Week 1 CFB game ever. So how is your job different from when you started?
Are we done? Can we just shut it down? Are we good? Championship, beat number one team, and I guess now we're ranked number one, so now we have the target on our back. First of all, thanks for having us today and talk about college sports. Look, I think in leadership, I think in anything, you want to celebrate the moments, but never too high, never too low. So you have to keep this balanced perspective of the job's never finished, the journey's never finished. We have to keep pushing, especially in this modern era. So, and I think a lot of times we can take the lead of our players. And our players that were returning off of last year's national championship team, we started putting up these pictures and these banners, national champions, and holding up the trophy and and they said, hey, can you take some of that stuff down? Because we want our own identity. And so following the lead of our athletes, I think has been a mantra for us to say, look, the job's never finished. We have jobs that we operate almost like a political campaign, churning, campaigning, dinners, events, but we don't have an election day. We have game day, and there's a scoreboard, but as far as what we do in pouring into young people and building buildings and the NIL chase and the revenue share and the television world, there really is not a finish line because there's always something next. So that's how we're approaching it. And at Ohio State, we still have an upside in many ways on the business front. So we're trying to capitalize on all those things as it relates to winning that national championship.
So you brought up NIL. Let's get into that right now.
They can get the hard questions.
So you guys are literally signing checks for revenue sharing agreements. Martin, how much have you paid out so far?
Wow, she goes in for the hard ones, Jen. Well, before I answer that hard question, thank you for having us here, and it's an honor to be with you. It's a new day. July 1st started the new era where you can share revenue with student athletes. At UCLA, we started August 1st, and as of August 1st, for the month of August, we shared $4.8 million.
Wow. Out
of our $20.5 million that's allotted. So. A lot of checks were being signed in August and more to come, but it's exciting. Our student athletes deserve that. UCLA, we've always been a proponent of that. And so, just how you manage that, how you make sure that we've been preparing for this for a while with the infrastructure needed to get all the student athletes information. We use PayPal and the Big Ten to make those payments and do those out. But it's a big undertaking just to be able to do that and kind of flip the switch and turn it on.
Wow. Nina, how much do you think these agreements are going to have a role in retention? Might we see fewer people going in the transfer portal?
That's the hope. First of all, also let me echo my colleagues' sentiments and thank you for having us here. And I thought the panel would be at least 4 hours for us to be able to kind of delve into some of these issues. But there are a lot of moving parts, and yeah, that's the hope. And for these agreements, they're structured. Every institution can decide how to structure them, and so and then even for us between sports, they're structured a little bit differently. The term is different, and so across several sports that we're revenue sharing with, it's a lot of moving pieces. And when I was signing all of those, we finally got a stamp in my office so that we can get them done quickly. But we are looking to to protect the university, for these agreements, also to do what's in the best interest of the student athletes. But this is a business arrangement now with them, and so we've got plenty of lawyers involved in writing agreements, again, to go back to protecting the university. But I absolutely think this is the right thing to be doing for these student athletes. I'm not going to tell you how many checks I've signed and how much they've totaled up to this point, but we are trying to be competitive in this space.
So let me share some numbers. Between June and August, the amount of money distributed has been $80 million. That's almost $1 million a day and about 100 deals a day. What do you think of this, Ross?
Is that the latest statistics
just came
from
out.
the College Sports Commission? They just released
Yep.
that. So I think it's great that, we've been asking for some transparency right around this. Look, I think it's awesome opportunities for our athletes. What do we say about college? You go there, receive an education, prepare yourself for the next level, whatever that is. Maybe you can go pro, excuse me, in your sport. I might need that emergency water. We were joking about that, and now it got me. So I think it's an awesome opportunity to basically have these athletes have the opportunities that other students have always had. But in our world, we restricted it. You can't be in a video game. You can't use YouTube channel. You can't monetize social media. You can't. And now it's like, let's go full throttle. And so we're seeing these big numbers, and some of it may be shocking, but in a lot of ways, it's a catch-up phase in some ways. Because our athletes have been restricted for so long. So I think all of us that are sitting here, I think as we try to be competitive in the new world, again, how do we provide opportunities for third-party NIL? We're going to have the rev share cap from the university. That's going to be standard. But what does the third-party roadmap look like? That's probably the next sort of arms race in all of this. And again, it's all about what can the athlete be provided in this moment in time. And so we're all pushing, towards that new era.
So with all this revenue sharing, a lot going to football, basketball, that leaves other sports maybe not with as much money. So let's talk about Olympic sports. Martin, Los Angeles is hosting the Olympics in 2028. The Olympic Village is going to be on your campus. Do you know how many medals UCLA athletes have won? Almost 300.
284?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a lot of change. And we're already starting to see schools cut teams. Diving at Virginia, swimming and diving at Cal Poly. What is the risk to the United States? Are we going to have fewer medals after this big shakeup?
So first, let me say, we at UCLA, we have a proud tradition with our Olympic sports. Since 1928, we've had 436 Bruins make 661 Olympic teams. So that's, if we're not the highest, we're in the top 2 in the country as far as producing Olympians. We have a phrase at UCLA Athletics, champions made here. It's Olympians made here too. So we take our investment in our Olympic sports very seriously. That said, the financial model has changed. The realities have changed, and we're extremely excited to be hosting LA 28 and the Olympics in 28 and having them on campus in Westwood. But there is a concern after LA 28 what programs around the country are going to do with their Olympic sports. We're going to keep investing. We think it's very important to continue to produce Olympians, champions, and that's important. But at the same time, the financial realities are changing. And so, what we're talking about more is we need to really study, in my opinion, what other countries do as far as how they fund Olympic sports, and take those learnings from other countries and apply it to what we do here in the United States. Because I think we're going to be very strong LA 28. I think the whole country is going to get behind that. And Casey Wasserman has done an excellent job. He's a Bruin with all the planning, and I think we're going to perform well. But there is a concern after LA 28. What does that mean? Is there going to be a cliff with Olympic sports? I don't see that obviously at UCLA, but I do worry about, as a whole, our Olympic movement if we don't figure out a better way to fund Olympic sports, because that's the issue. The issue is the funding model for Olympic sports, and I think that's got to adjust.
So let's talk about the funding model. We keep hearing the idea of private equity? Is it coming for college sports? How would this even work? Nina?
Can we call David Rubenstein back? I mean, I think he's the one that we need to be asking that question. Yes, the financial model in college athletics is stressed. The way that we are operating as a business model, I mean, you all, if we opened our books to you, you would think it's a joke, the way that we are operating. And so we need to figure out how to build something more sustainable so we can support broad-based programming, student athlete opportunities to come to our campuses, not just to compete in sports, but to, receive in my case, a Duke degree. And so, we are exploring all kinds of revenue models, and that certainly includes private equity. In the traditional sense, I'm not convinced that it would work, but we're talking to a lot of folks to kind of figure out, are there hybrid models, are there unique ways that we could do something to infuse capital, cash into our athletic departments and into our universities. I mean, I think there are a lot of revenue opportunities on campus as well, and so how do we kind of create that synergy with campus to continue to build revenue? We are heavily reliant on philanthropy, but if we could have been raising an extra $20.5 million a year, we would have been. And so I don't think straight philanthropy is the answer. And so, like I said, we are exploring everything, and I think private equity is on the table for sure.
Ross, have you thought about, does it work at the conference level, at the individual school level? Talk a little bit about that.
You're talking about private equity?
Private equity.
Yeah, I think the unique thing is, Duke being a private school, you have two, large-scale public institutions in UCLA and Ohio State. The question that I have as a public institution is, what are we selling? Because I'm owned by the state of Ohio. Typically, the state of Ohio cannot take investors, right? And so the complications of being a public university are really, really challenging. Typically, if we need capital, we borrow money. And usually with bond ratings at a state institution as big as Ohio State, your rates are pretty good, right? And so you borrow the money to build something or to invest in capital. At the conference level, it could be different, right? Because those are private, corporations, if you will, private entities, typically non-for-profit. So I think nobody can sit up here in today's world and say you don't need the money. Everybody needs capital. Everybody needs money. Everybody's trying to churn and burn through this new era of what it looks like to keep investing and support your athletes. The conference model, to me, is a way to explore it. Same questions, though. What am I giving up at Ohio State? We're members of the Big Ten, UCLA, and that's hard to say, right? Given realignment, that may be a question. But I used to work at UCLA back in the Pac-10 days, and so you think about where we are today. So the conferences have the best ability to maybe privatize, to take on capital. But again, what are the strings attached? What am I giving up? What future revenues perhaps would private equity want to take? What control would they need to have or have to have? Is it passive investments, right? There's all those things, and many in the room probably deal in private equity spaces. So we're learning all of this. We're studying it because what Nina said, you have to look for alternative sources of revenue. So I think it's a curious analysis right now that we can go through and use our conferences as that type of vehicle.
So let's talk about conferences. There's lots of realignment. How's it going so far, Martin?
It's going great. It's going great. Speaking for UCLA, this past year was the first year that we were in the Big Ten conference, and there were a lot of questions about how would UCLA fare, and I would say we won 7 Big Ten championships. We won 3 MPSF championships, so 10 conference championships total, which was the most in the Big Ten. So I'd say things went pretty well for UCLA first year in the Big Ten. But it was also a learning year. Anytime you do something new or different, there are going to be some learnings. There are going to be some things that you have to understand. And travel. There was a lot of questions about what the travel looked like. And by and large, our student athletes did an excellent job with just persevering through some of the changes and differences. But we learned with a couple of our sports that men's soccer, for example, their first away trip, they were delayed and they got in late, right, to Northwestern. And so the next 2 trips, they went out a day early, you know, and so we made adjustments. We also traveled academic support staff with a lot more of our teams for the first time, just to make sure our student athletes could have someone to study and proctor exams and things on the road, which traditionally we had only done maybe in football and basketballs. So, you know, we learned a lot, we grew a lot, and we also were very keen on priority scheduling to try to make sure that we minimize the amount of class time that was missed.
And Nina, how's it going in the ACC with some new West Coast additions?
We do. We have Cal and Stanford and SMU joined the SEC the ACC last year, and it's worked out well. And you know, I wasn't worried for our student athletes. You know, we actually competed a lot out at Stanford and on the West Coast, and so our student athletes aren't terribly impacted. It wasn't significant. I mean, it's once a year, once every other year, for about 11 sports that play an ACC schedule. But we put together an integrative performance team, and so you've got representation around the table to kind of study and maximize our athletes' performance. And so you've got nutritionists, behavioral health, sleep experts, and academic folks, and just to make sure that student athlete welfare is a top priority and consideration. And so we've fared well in the first year, and I think Cal and Stanford folks would probably say the same as Martin. I mean, it is a lot of travel, it is a lot of wear and tear, but it is our reality. And so how are we going to keep the best interests of the student athletes a priority?
Ross, do you think the amount set out by the settlement is enough, or will budgets have to go up?
So the settlement calls for 22% of revenue in certain categories: television revenue, ticket sales revenue, sponsorship, over an average of the Autonomy 4, used to be Autonomy 5 conferences. And that number worked out to about $20.5 million. And then a couple things were nuances in the settlement that, because we were all trying to figure out how to pay for it, is if you add a new scholarship up to $2.5 million, that counts against the cap. We added 91 scholarships at Ohio State. If you added any Alston academic award money, which was a previous lawsuit that we had to deal with, that counted against the cap. And so we actually eliminated the Alston money, but we added new scholarships. So we had $18 million of cash to then distribute on a revenue share basis. We chose 4 sports: women's volleyball, women's basketball, men's basketball, and of course football. And so now, again, back to what I said earlier. So is 18 or 20.5 million enough? No. The answer is no, right? Because again, it's all about, okay, what are they doing over here? What's this program doing? How is this person now taking their apparel contract, let's say, because those have been in the news lately, and then redeploying that towards NIL above and beyond the cap? Has to go through the system, has to go through the clearinghouse, it has to meet those standards that are part of the settlement. So now we're all going through this analysis to say, is there primary revenue that we receive as an athletic department that could then be deployed to meet the house case settlement above and beyond the cap? That's a reality that we're having. So what's the right number? Will it settle out a little bit? I do believe it will settle out a little bit. I do believe we can slow down some of the transfer market pieces because we will have memos of understanding between us and the athlete. There can be buyout provisions if they do leave. So I do think we can slow that down a little bit. But the number is the number. And what you have to decide as an institution is, how do you prioritize? How do you build out your third-party NIL opportunities? What does that number look like? We don't know that yet. We're trying to capitalize. We're trying to monetize that. We started a group called Buckeye Sports Group. It's really a marketing agency within our athletic department in partnership with Learfield, who's our multimedia rights holder. If you ask a coach, they'll just tell you it's unlimited. Whatever the cap is, it should just be unlimited. But I think if you throw in the scholarship dollars and all the resources that we do provide the athletes, they're receiving over 50% of the gross revenues from our athletic department. And so I think that's a valuable story, probably hasn't been told enough. And then you layer on how much has been put through NIL Go so far. There is a lot of money that our athletes are receiving, and rightfully so. And so it's going to be a constant just journey that we have to just navigate and be aggressive.
So Martin, you have an MBA. That's a good thing. There's so much change in here. What are you hiring in your front office staff? Talk a little bit about who you're looking for.
Yeah, well, we made a few strategic hires as we were planning for the House settlement. One is, for the first time this past year, we hired a chief revenue officer. And again, one of the things you're seeing that we're beginning to look a lot more like professional models in different sports. I wouldn't say we are professional, but there are some similarities as far as how you have to do player evaluation, talent acquisition, some of those things. So from a revenue standpoint, we've got to all generate new revenue, and that's something that becomes at the forefront. We have many meetings now where the only two things we talk about is who's generating revenue, what are some ideas, and then cost containment. That's what it comes down to now, because we want to do as much as we can for our student athletes from a resource standpoint. And then from a front office perspective, both of our basketball programs recently hired assistant general managers. And again, this is now, with the transfer portal being the way it is and being so fluid, you have to be evaluating everyone across the country. It can't just be certain high schools and colleges. Now it's got to be the whole country. And so we've done that and made some investments in our basketball programs, both of them. And then in football, you're seeing that obviously with general managers and also talent acquisition, data analysts, looking at different kinds of data to be able to assess how someone may perform when they come into your program. Just in our football program, we have 55 new players. That's a lot. And so you better have the infrastructure to be able to evaluate talent at the high school level and at the collegiate level to be prepared to have such an influx of new talent into your program.
So Nina, you're an accountant by training and a lawyer. So what do you look for in a coach? What do you look for in a coach?
Not an accountant and a lawyer, but a CEO, actually. I'm starting my 5th year as athletic director at Duke, and I've hired 10 head coaches. No more, I'm tired. But it's interesting, you kind of evaluate where the program is, and do you need a coach to come in and rebuild? Do you need a coach to, maintain positive momentum? What's the culture of the team? Why is your previous coach gone, et cetera? So you kind of analyze where you are in the moment, and that, really helps to kind of then build the profile of the candidate that you're looking for. For us and my colleagues, I'm sure, would say the same thing. You need somebody that comes in that understands the institution. What student athletes are we recruiting to Duke who can be successful at Duke? And so somebody that certainly understands that. But now more than ever, we are looking for CEOs, especially in the high profile sports, football, men's and women's basketball, to come in and they're not just doing X's and O's anymore. As Martin said, we've got talent acquisition and GMs and player personnel and negotiating agreements. And those coaches are now negotiating with agents. And so there's so many moving pieces and so many parts. I would say definitely in today's world, we're hiring CEOs, and I've got 27 programs, so 27 CEOs.
So we've talked about players moving around. What about coaches? Are you concerned now you've made these hires, then they're going to get poached? What about that?
Never happens.
I think she's looking at you, Ross.
She's looking at me. Yeah, that's my fault. One of your 10 hires is my fault. My previous institution, I was at Texas A&M for 5 years. We went through a football transition, and we hired Mike Elko from Duke. And these things are, you say the word poach. Back in the old school days, it used to be the AD would call the other AD and ask for permission. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And it really sucks that you can't do that, because that should be the right thing to do. But the confidentiality and the high profile nature of these search processes have to be just, and so Nina and I talked, as things were, kind of winding down. And again, that's unfortunate, but I couldn't risk confidentiality. She can't risk it on her end, right? And so it's very difficult. Now,
that's his way of saying they couldn't trust you.
Right.
They got a big paycheck. They got a big paycheck. There is buyout provisions in most of these high profile
We took your money.
contracts. So they got paid. But I don't think you had to pay a buyout on Manny. I don't think so.
No, did not.
You got a big uplift there. And it's hard. It's a hard process. It's a hard industry. People can move around a lot. we get criticized for coaches and ADs moving around a lot, and that's why you got this player movement that is kind of transpired. So it can be tough, but hopefully relationships can endure.
We're good. We're here.
Over time.
If I can, though, Jenna, listen, I completely understand. I mean, we weren't talking because of the confidentiality piece until towards the end, but it really comes down to the AD and current coach's relationship. And Mike Elko and I were talking, and we were communicating, and I wasn't caught off guard by any means. And so I'm trying to retain a coach, but then also in my mind, mentally preparing to start the hiring cycle for the next one. So I think that's really important.
So we're in a new era of university budget cuts. On one end, you're shedding jobs, and on another end, you're having to raise money. Can you talk about that complexity in today's higher ed world?
Higher ed is extremely complex, and you know that better than anybody. And sure, I mean, it is, the landscape for higher education right now is really challenging. And I am running a business, a for-profit business, if you will, encapsulated in academia, a nonprofit, where funding is being threatened, every day. And so our university did go through a strategic realignment and cost reduction process, whereby hundreds of millions of dollars in operating costs were cut, and a lot of that was in personnel. And athletics is not immune to that. I mean, we are good campus citizens, and we participate in those types of processes just like everybody else does on campus. And so, I personally do wrestle with the fact that I have to cut sports budgets and jobs within athletics, but then on the other hand, I have this $20.5 million that I am giving to the players, and it is tough to find that balance. But we kind of go back to who we are, what we stand for, and why we do what we do. Again, to provide an opportunity for student athletes to come realize the very best education and compete for national championships. So it's hard right now, but we are figuring our way. We've got incredible leadership at Duke University, and we're going to make this work.
Let me add on that too. I mean, this is also a time whenever there's chaos and change, there's also opportunity. And I think we don't tell the story enough about our student athletes. Student athletes have it better today than they've ever had. And we were all student athletes. We've got some here in the audience. I know I saw Kevin, a former football player here at UCLA. But student athletes have a great opportunity, and we're here in the development of young people. And that takes investment. And if you look at athletic programs, those are the single biggest engagement tools of a university. UCLA those 4 letters are known across the world. A big part of that is Jackie Robinson, is Coach John Wooden, is Annie Myers-Drysdale, is Trailblazers, Arthur Ashe, that have made UCLA what it is on a global scale. And so we talk about the money, we talk about the change, but we don't talk about the development of student athletes and how they go out and become leaders and do great things. And so I think we've got to always keep in mind investment in athletics comes back tenfold in the product and the people that we develop, young men and young women, but also from a university perspective, it's the largest marketing tool. I hate to say this, but if you have a big seminar on campus, it doesn't do the same as a football or basketball game. And so we've got to make sure we continue to invest in our athletic programs, and we've got a great administration at UCLA that understands that.
We've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to ask each of you, what has surprised you the most, and what are you looking forward to in this year? Nina, we'll start with you.
Oh gosh, I'm looking forward to, this is cliche to say, but the year. I mean, as I mentioned, we had a kind of tough summer, and just for all of us kind of managing the chaos of everything that's going on. I was kind of excited summer was over. We got back to campus and we're playing the games. To go into your football stadium on Saturday afternoon and to just enjoy the pomp and circumstance of it all. So I'm looking forward to the year, athletically, competitively. And to watch our student athletes go out there and crush it. In terms of surprise, I don't know. Every day is a surprise, Janet. I'm going to pause on what surprised me the most. Martin?
Yeah, mine is going to be the same example. What am I looking forward to in the surprise? I've been surprised at just how entrepreneurial and how positive our student athletes have utilized their NIL and revenue share to help others. That's been a pleasant surprise. And I'll give you an example. What I'm looking forward to is the opportunities now with our student athletes. Make no mistake, we have a business relationship now with our student athletes. We develop them, but we also have a business relationship. I went to a football practice a week and a half ago, and I was standing with Jordan Childs, Olympian, one of our gymnasts. She's coming back for her last year. And we talked, I asked her, I said, hey, we're going to think about doing something special with the gymnastics program. And I talked with her, and she said, hey, if you need me to go make a pitch or to help. And so it's like this business relationship, and she wants to do so much for her teammates.
Let's get Ross in before we end.
Yeah, I think what we're looking forward to is just what we're here for, right? And what I'll say is it's not a surprise to me, but maybe it's a surprise to you or the general public. This is what's happening on our campus. The young people that come on our campus, they want a degree, they want to be educated, they want to be developed, and they want to play the games. And yeah, there's a lot of money, and we have to have those conversations, but people get surprised at hearing that. They think that all these athletes are coming in with all these super agents and they just want millions of dollars. And you have to have those conversations, but play games, go to class, develop young people. That's what I'm really, really excited about. And that's why we're all excited about the model continuing in college athletics.
Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.